I'm fine, dandy, and tickety boo. Thank you. You?
I'm top of the world. I'm floating on this crest of wonderfulness at the moment. Don't know why. Just I don't know. Things seem to be lining up for me, which is really nice. Even rejection letters.
Heroin's good for that. Yeah. Good rejection letters.
Good rejection letters. You can't get better than that.
Pretty much an oxymoron, usually, isn't it? But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's all a bit things, and it seems to be going well for Sean. You'll notice we are sans Sean again today, covering all bases. Been called away. He's really busy at the moment. A lot of his book stuff is really catching a grip, so he's getting some traction there and rushing off the meetings.
Yeah, that cover that he'd shared on Facebook looks pretty damned exciting, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's October. That's happening.
Wow. Can't wait for that. Really looking forward to it.
Cool. I think we've got a little bit of a delay in our connection today, or my connection, I think it is, to be perfectly honest with you. So if some of our conversation sounds a bit stilted, listener, I do apologise. Now, before we get going, I'm actually going to do this slightly different. Normally, when we talk about a story this old, I'm kind of like, stuff the spoilers. You've had time to read it. However, in our research of trying to read this Vampire Tower, also known as Terror's Dark Tower, we've actually discovered it's very difficult to find. And it seems to be really kind of hidden. And I've had to do an audio recording of this so that we had time to actually listen to it. So the others had time to listen to it. And then Sean goes and gets called away. So there's only you that's really listened to it all the way through. And I am going to be posting that up on YouTube, or as you watch this, you will notice that it will be there as well. So I'm going to put a test card up. I'm going to say after the test card, we're going to do the synopsis and everything. We are going to talk about the end of this. So if you don't want to know the end, bearing in mind that this was written by apparently one of the most decorated and revered writers of the Lock Room Mystery. So there is a twist in the tale. So if you don't want to know that just yet and you want to listen to it first, please, after the test card, we are going to talk about what happens all the way through to the end. So, test card now. And welcome back. Okay, so are you ready for the synopsis, Ash?
Yeah, I'm champing at the bit.
Cool. It's one of my type of synopsis, so it's not particularly deep. Basically, we have a courting couple and this gentry type fella who has come down from London and fallen in love with, oh God, I can't remember the names. Is it Ellie? Alice, I think it is. Anyway, he's fallen in love with this beautiful woman, but she has a curse on the family. That is, any woman that decides to marry a man against the family's wishes will die horribly in the tower by going into the top room. For some reason, they just all go to the top room a week before their wedding. And it goes back to this old story where this old woman, she was betrothed to this fella. She didn't like him very much, so she got him murdered by getting him hung in a field as a scarecrow and had his eyes poked out by crows. But before he died, he said, I will visit you a week before your wedding. And he came a week before the wedding with his crows, and they came and pecked her eyes out, and she died after having her eyes pecked out. And this is what continues to happen. There is an account of one that happened 50 years previous. So some people are still alive who remembered that. And the sister goes up there, and it's a week before her wedding. She gets murdered. And it turns out that it's actually not supernatural at all, as the last sister, the last one to go up, who's going to get married in a week, gets this detective fella. I wish I could remember the names. I'm terrible with names. This detective fella who then sorts it out and works out that actually it's a hideous crime that is taking place, and this is the uncle and the cousin that are perpetrating the crime. And he's basically created the uncle's father had created a pair of binoculars that, as you tried to focus them, they had two knives come out and stab you in the eyes and look like your eyes have been poked out by crows. And he sorted this out. And then a little twist right at the end, the uncle is killed this way by a switcheroo of the binoculars. I know I was cutting out a little bit there to you, but in the little bits of the Norman Collier version that you heard, how was that?
That was, I think that was the same story that I read. You said about knives going out. I thought it was air pistol things popping out.
Well, it's from what I could gather, it was an air pistol mechanism that forced the two blades out. So the blades came out really quickly.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that would make sense then. Yeah. Yeah. Other than that, no, that was the story that I partook of this week.
Yep. There we go. It was. I tell you what. I thought, having read it out, I'd remember a lot more of that, but my brain just went completely blank now. All the character names. I couldn't remember a single one of them.
I was not overly impressed with this one.
Somehow, I didn't think you would be.
Yeah, I know I'm such a picky twat. The things that didn't work for me, I mean, I thought he built the narrative tension really well. I thought the fact that, there's a family curse, people losing their eyeballs, this is happening. That part, I thought that was done really, really well. But when it came down to the whole, there's a curse, and the curse is on women in the family who are wanting to get married to somebody that the family doesn't approve of. That's a fucking narrow market of people who are seemed a little bit contrived. I thought the whole notion of the binoculars pop things out and sort of like pierce somebody's brain, and then they conveniently drop them out of the window, that it takes one of the heads off the swans on its way down. I thought that, again, was a little bit far-fetched, because if I was working with a pair of binoculars, it wouldn't be, I'll stand at the window to do it. I would
Sorry, can you repeat? This is terrible connection.
Yes, of course I can. Yeah, I said it was absolute steaming dog shit, and the word convenient.
No, I get what you mean. I'm going to fill in the blanks there, actually. Right. There's some of this stuff that I really like you. I like some of the characters in it. I actually thought the Sir Renfield, or whatever he's called, the detective fella, I really liked him as a character. I thought he was great. And the way that he had his daft sidekick, that was the one that was in love. That was the dynamic between them, the one that was telling the story. It was very Holmes Watson. It was very Morse, and it was always that kind of, Poirot has his little bit of a dumb sidekick. And I really liked the way that was going. And I actually liked the knives in the binoculars. I thought that was a horrendous thing to have. And the idea of just making them slightly out of focus, that will force the person to do that. But yeah, I mean, there are totally the old idea of he stands by the window because he knows the person is going to put them through the bars because they've made the bar. That starts making it as the whole room's been made just for this one purpose. Yeah. So that the bars are just so next to each other that you would, I mean, I can't see very well through both my eyes. I have binoculars down at Manchester Airport. I turn them on their side and look at them like a telescope. So yeah, I'd have been hit here, and one I'd have been that way around. But I wouldn't be like that. And then it goes, and by the way, he had a normal set of binoculars in his pocket that he could switch with them in case they didn't drop out the window. It's when things are planned to such an nth that the tiniest little thing going wrong affects the whole plan, it loses it for me unless it's really, really clever. And it wasn't really, really clever. You know, the whole notion of just, oh, go up there to disprove a curse. Oh, how about I stay down here to disprove a curse? How about I do that one? How about I go on holiday for this week? You know.
I mean, when this story starts off, I was thinking that rather than it being a horror story or a mystery story, it was reading more like a romance. The main focus seemed to be on the attractiveness of the female prize that this man was going to get if he solved this mystery, which again made me think it's of its time with its misogyny.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
Oh, very much. I think it is. It has certain amounts of akin to The Man with the Nose in that respect, in what I thought was the attitude towards the woman in this, and on the women in general in this. Like you say, it's very much of its time. However, I think it reads. I found it a bit stunning when they started talking about having phone calls, because it didn't read like a time that had telephones.
Yeah, I got exactly the same thing. It was almost as a phone calls, really?
It was very, very strange. However, in saying all of this, you know, and we're not frightened to diss the greats, and there's no doubt that this man, John Dickson Carr, is one of the greats. When you actually consider that this story became the Vampire Tower when it got turned into during a radio adaptation in the war that he did, an adaptation for the radio, The Dark Hour, it was called, with the Man in Black as the host, which was the first anthology horror to ever be produced that had a host that talked about the next story coming up is a tale of absolute fear, you know, all the a la Twilight Zone and everything that came off the back of it. And in 1949, it did a TV show and was actually the first ever horror television show on British television. And that was the first one to be done. So that story was adapted to become the Vampire Tower.
All right.
As the first of this kind that was then emulated around the world. So however much I dislike parts of the story, you can't take away that level of creativity in creating, like you say, with Edgar Allan Poe. And I know in the last episode, I was not so enamored by the end of it, and it actually worked out that there was a point where if he'd ended it here, I'd have thought it was the best thing ever written. But this is what causes it to go on. Yeah. With this one, there's no way that I would call it the best thing that was ever written, but it has come from the mind of someone who is so creative and so innovative that it does contain that way. I'm not going to forgive it. I'm not going to forgive it its foibles for that, but there must be something in this story that has, at the time when it came out, must have been quite remarkable for people, for it to have that kind of impact, to be able to move through those different media.
I've got to admit, the conclusion was probably my favourite part, even though I thought with the conclusion it was contrived and unlikely. It did seem to give that nice, this is, that nice Scooby-Doo ending of, we're actually getting to see who's responsible for the occult things happening. And I liked the way that it was explained and tidied up. Yeah, I thought it was very, very clean writing. Just a couple of...
Convoluted, sorry, I think would be the word, isn't it?
Yeah, far too convoluted.
Yeah.
Which I suppose we expect something to be convoluted. I mean, I've just this week finished reading a Dan Brown novel, Origins, which I'd found it on my computer and thought, I thought I'd read this one before. Started listening to it and thought, this is just like all of his others. And then about 3 hours into it, realised, I have heard it before. That's why I think it's just like all his others. But again, you've got an awful lot of convoluted stuff within that. You've got stuff like people, I think probably about 8 hours of that was them trying to work out what the password was for somebody's mobile phone or for somebody's email account. And they worked out that it was sort of like a line of poetry that was 47 characters long. And they'd got a computer helping them to find it. And it was just sort of like, oh, well, which line of poetry is it? And yeah.
Yeah.
Convoluted.
It's the way they see things. It's a bit like the within this story, the bit that made my eyes roll was I got the phone call to come over, and that was the horse coming up that created the supposed phantom horse that was coming. You know, is that kind of just everything about those moments were too by the second. They had to happen at very precise timings. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the effect. And that's where it becomes, you know, a little bit... but it breaks the fourth wall in a way, doesn't it? You lose the mystery of it. A bit like what I was saying about him waking up and it being a dream in the Edgar Allan Poe one. It took me out of the story, and I ended up realising the mechanic rather than being in the story. And I think this suffered from the same problem at times. I mean, I love the switch. I love the way that the cousin had actually got himself back again, and he'd switched them back, and so he died. You know, the guy died by his own evil means. But I think it was, like you say, it's just too many things that could just not have happened. And it would never have happened.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I can really enjoy watching are heist movies, where you sort of like know that they've got this meticulous plan that this is going to happen and this is going to happen and this is going to happen and they're going to get away with the goods. And what usually happens is step one, everything goes all Pete Burns. And yeah, it's just a domino effect of this doesn't happen, this doesn't happen, this doesn't happen. And that's the entertaining part.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it becomes too unrealistic when fiction, everything goes the way the characters are expecting, because that doesn't accurately reflect real life, because in real life nothing goes the fucking way we plan it.
Yes.
Ever.
Yeah, that's exactly
wow,
it.
Cynical, yeah. I didn't think I was going to go so dark and cynical today, but
it's a dark and sinister story. But I tell you, the other thing as well is I know you are particularly fond of genre and looking at things from a genre point of view. And I do maintain that in a murder mystery, even in a locked room murder mystery, when you get to the end of it, there must always be the moment where you go back and read it and realize that the clues were always there. You had a chance of solving it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the whole metafictional part of a murder mystery. I don't feel in this particular story, however much his lovely tension was set up, it didn't give you the clue. It didn't signpost it enough for you to really be able to have a chance of solving it yourself if you had that kind of lateral brain. What do you think?
It didn't, no. There's no... the key thing that you would need to have guessed is that it was down to the binoculars, and that the binoculars were, and that as a clue, it should have been sort of like told that people were taking binoculars in there, but the binoculars were never seen again, even though nobody sort of like searched the moat. It was just... It should have been more the switch of the binoculars, shouldn't it? The binoculars shouldn't have fallen out the window. You're right. The binoculars should have been in the room. That should have been is it the MacGuffin? And again, for binoculars to be switched, the whole idea that one character is carrying a pair of binoculars that are identical to, in every respect, to a pair of lethal murder binoculars, and can just sort of like take them out of his pocket and switch them. That's just fucking stupid, for want of a better way of phrasing it.
I was all right with that, to be honest with you, because I envisage. I mean, you have to look at the length of them. I think it describes. They describe it as like an 8-inch spike. Well, yeah, that would be a fucking big set of binoculars, then, won't it? To get to be a spike big enough to get in your brain, they won't be opera glasses. So, I mean, the idea of identical, because he was a jeweler, the father that made them. So making two identical
Yes.
pairs would be ideal. You know, I can understand that. But you're right, the actual bulkiness of something that can contain that mechanism and a prism, because that's the bit that I was trying to figure out. If you've got these two big spike things, yet the vision that they're looking at is out of focus, you know, so they obviously can't see the big spike things in the way. So there must be an optical mechanism that allows them to see around the big spike things. Then, yeah, they are going to be quite bulky, aren't they?
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think that part was even crappier than I remember. Yeah.
It just doesn't quite work.
No, but as you say, the guy's got such a heritage and such a rich credentials in storytelling. This one, have we got any idea why the name changed?
They changed it for the radio adaptation. I don't know why they changed it. I mean, I've got it here. That the name is when it sort of comes through. Valentine Darrell was the name of the man in black. He was the guy that used to host the Dark Hour, and they did adaptations of things like this. I mean, this guy. I don't like the
idea of somebody having those initials. Really, I think that's
yeah, different times back then. Let's have a look at. I mean, he did adaptations of things like the Pit and the Pendulum to go on radio, and stuff like that.
Right.
This guy, John Dickson Carr. In 1949, the BBC presented a season of Appointment with Fear is the name of the actual show, not the Dark Hour. Appointment with Fear was the radio show and became the television show. The Driving Force, when it was produced by the guy Michael Carras, who would later become the driving force behind Hammer films. The TV adaptations, they included A Man with a Cloak and Vampire Tower. It just seemed to take a change when it went onto TV.
I suppose, I mean, the suggestion with calling it Vampire Tower is that it's going to get people thinking, oh, is it a vampire that's flown up there and is responsible for popping people's eyeballs out or whatever? I mean, the backstory, the whole idea is being sort of like tied up, mummified and stuck on a scarecrow thing so that they're getting their eyes pecked out. That was kind of fun detail. I didn't like the historical aspect of that. But yeah, it was just the other parts that weren't working for me.
I think it's not how the reveal happened, it's what the actual reveal was, I think. But looking back at it, what we don't know, and this is a big thing, is it was called Vampire Tower when it was adapted, and it was an adaptation of one of his short stories. So what we don't know is how the ending of the adaptation was, and had he changed the ending of that adaptation, because we've not been able to find even the radio episode or the television episode. It's frustrating. Yes. So maybe that's it. Maybe it was. I mean, it was a bit of a throwaway short story, because it's not one of his famous detectives either, this one. So I think the actual short story itself may have been flawed, and maybe he corrected it when it went into the Appointment with Fear, and that maybe that one works better. Maybe there is more.
You're too nice.
Sorry?
You are far too nice. It's sort of like, you're too nice in thinking, he probably corrected this. Because, the majority of people who are writers, it's just a case of, do you know what, the fuckers bought this one once, in that case, they'll buy it again. Let's just sort of like polish this turd.
No,
on it. And
I think the advent of TV and in particular with stage production, I mean, I always think back to, I mean, you know me, Ash, I'm absolutely, completely obsessed with the creative process of things. So one of the things I absolutely adore is going back over the tropes that are now known within certain things. And one of the favorite ones is Frankenstein. Right? Now, we know Frankenstein is, the modern Prometheus. It is an incredible science fiction story. It's an incredible horror story. Its origins are amazing, and it doesn't contain Igor. Igor did not become a character until it was a stage presentation. That's when he became a character. And so he is now synonymous with the Frankenstein concept, but he didn't come from Mary Shelley's mind. He came from them trying to reduce the amount of characters that are in the novel so that it could be put on stage. So that's when I talk about adaptations. Sometimes either correct or add. Sometimes they get worse. Sometimes they come up with a worse idea because they think we have to change it, for no other reason than changing it. But sometimes that creative process can be almost the difference between the first to the second to the third draft of something. And you can get something that is, okay, you go back, yes, it got published, yes, it sold quite well. Then you go back and read it and go, that won't work when we're trying to actually do that as a radio thing, because we're going to have to try and convince them that this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. So they might actually come up with a more elegant solution. Same thing, binocular spikes. There's going to be so much of it that doesn't work, but there might be other parts of the timings that you might watch it and go, that's even worse. And the whole thing is we don't know. But as a creative process, I've seen that happen a number of times over, with adaptations, where you can take something and you can, because of reader response as well, when you're doing the adaptation, you can actually add the bits that you didn't even realize were there. And you could signpost them that you hadn't done before, because you're suddenly reading it back. So I think adaptation can work very well like that. So it's not necessarily being kind. It's kind of more thinking about the creative process.
And they actually recently brought the Man in Black back onto radio. Mark Gatiss did a couple of seasons of Man in Black stories, where he was the Man in Black. And yeah, they're very, very listenable, if listenable is a word. It is now. Yeah.
I'll have to investigate
those. They're well worth it. I don't know if it's just 2 seasons, and it might be 12 episodes in total. But yeah, they've got that nice creepy vibe to them. And yeah, they're very well presented, because I think radio horror is overlooked for its efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's 2 areas of horror I think that are seriously overlooked. Is one is radio, and it has been used to great effect. I mean, if you listen to the Christopher Lee doing the M.R. James and the Edgar Allan Poe stories, which are all Tales by the Fireside that he did. I mean, he also did a version of The Monkey's Paw, which is just wonderful to listen to. It is an abridged version. They do cut bits out of it, but it's really, really nice to listen to. It's so spooky. And the other is stage presentation, horror on in the theatre. You don't get it as much as you used to nowadays.
Shame, isn't it?
It is, actually. I mean, I'd like to go and see 2022, or not 2022, 222, which is the latest ghost story scaring the bejesus out of everybody in London. Hoping that'll talk at some point. Yeah,
that would be nice. And yeah, I need to start listening to more radio shows that are spooky. Or we need to start working on some that are spooky.
I think we should. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think, and we've done this before, we've spoken about it here, I think there are a couple of things missing in the horror genre at the moment. One is a really, really scary radio play, and the other one is a really, really funny, scary radio play. I'm missing the horror version of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think is a distinct missing thing from the annals of radio. Yeah, I think you're right. I think something needs to be out there, and I think if anybody's going to do it, it should be us. I think so. And if you agree with us, listeners, then please put it in the comments below. Put anything in the comments. We just like some comments, really. Please. But anyways, enough of this. So if we agree on that one, that it had some interesting ideas, we can't fault the writing style itself, because the writing style was again really, really fantastic, but it just fell short in a couple of areas that we think a more modern audience just wouldn't buy. Yeah, it was. Yeah, there were a couple of missteps there that just pulled me out of it. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Right then. So that's where we are with that one. So now leaves me with this question. Ash, what are we reading next week? Right. Who was your favourite character in Buffy? My favourite character in Buffy? Evil Willow. Yep.
So this story that we're looking at this week is called The Willows.
The Willows.
By Algernon.
The Willows.
The Willows by Algernon Blackwood. Algernon Blackwood. I've double checked on YouTube. There are versions, audio versions on there. I think the running time's probably about a couple of hours.
Yeah, cool. Oh, so it's a good chunky one then. I tell you what, that was one thing when I did this one. It was 1 hour 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All credit you narrators out there that do this on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, I could have been watching Love Island instead of that.
I don't care how convoluted the ending of was this one. It saved you from fucking Love Island. That's an absolute. It's not like, granted, we have read some before that I think Love Island would have been preferable to, but I don't think this was one of them. I just think it was a misstep, this one.
Yeah.
It wasn't dreadful.
No, I don't think there's anything that we've read that's actually been worse than an episode of Love Island.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so that's what we got next week. Willows by, who was it again?
Algernon Blackwood.
Algernon and Blackwood.
Algernon.
Algernon.
Yeah.
Algernon. I was going to be looking for two people then.
No, I was looking at an M.R. James one where he collaborated with someone, but maybe for another date.
We shall come back to that.
Yes.
And if you listen to the narration and you like it, let us know on that one as well. We might do some of our own special presentations. I think that's the first thing that we need to do, actually, Ash. I think we need to come up with something of like a bit of a 20-minute script that we are going to record and put up on this channel and ask our audience whether or not we're scary enough on that. Let's test it out. That's what we need to do.
Brilliant.
Anyways, that was absolutely fantastic.
That was brilliant. Thank you. Cheers, mate. And looking forward to Algernon.
Absolutely. See you later. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.